Hello and welcome back to Immigration Law for Tech Startups. I'm your host, Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, where we work with rapidly scaling tech companies, highly motivated global entrepreneurs and their families to find visas and green cards to live and work legally in the United States. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest my dear friend and colleague, Navroop Sahdev. Hi, Navroop, and welcome.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to be here with you. And everybody, Navroop is a force of nature and an inspiration. She's the founder and CEO of the Digital Economist, a Connection Science Fellow at MIT, and a venture partner at NextGen Ventures as well. So lovely, lovely to be here with you today.
So nice to be here, Sophie. I can't wait to dive in in our
Yeah,
all things immigration.
so much to talk about. We want to hear about your immigration journey and what your startup does and how you launched it, um, and what you see as the future of the global economy and startups. So there's a lot that I know we're going to have fun talking about today. And just for our audience, a little more background on Navroop. She wears many hats. She's a pioneering economist and technology futurist. She's frequently sought after for interviews. She's a TEDx speaker. She's been listed as one of the top blockchain influencers. She has done all sorts of amazing things at global universities, including MIT and Harvard, I believe, in the United States. She's an author. She co-authored a book called Blockchain Economics: Implications of Distributed Ledgers, and has a bunch of master's degrees. She was a UN youth delegate in 2017. So if you think from that intro that Navroop has had, an illustrious 40-year career, I think that might be a common assumption, but I don't know. Do you consider yourself a millennial or Gen Z, Navroop?
I am absolutely a millennial, Sophie,
Okay.
and it's not 40 years. I'm 30 years old.
You packed in a
There you
lifetime
go.
into about 10 years. And you grew up in India thinking that you wanted to be an artist, right?
That is true. Kind of going back to our previous conversation, Sophie,
Yeah.
when we had you as a guest at the Digital Economist. Yes. Yeah, life is interesting, and I guess purpose sort of triumphs everything else. So, and I would
Did
say
you know
that kind
when
of.
you were a kid, when you were thinking about the arts or thinking about what sort of career that you wanted, that you would live in so many countries or immigrate out of India? Was that a long-term ambition for yourself?
Absolutely not. I never imagined I would ever be out of India, even just for even a visit, which is kind of crazy. I do remember as a child, though, just because I think just a lot of imagination, and I was just talking with my mom last night. Even she in turn was talking about her childhood dreams of adventure. So I think she really instilled that in us sort of early on, and I would kind of dream of faraway places, which I could talk about. I ended up in the Arctic 3 times, in Antarctica, so kind of touching the last
Wow.
corners of the planet, as well. And yeah, it's just I didn't know what immigration was. In fact, if anything, I would say that the part of India I'm from, northwestern India, state of Punjab, um, there are actually a lot of migrants who live all
Yeah.
over the world.
Yeah.
Punjabis are known to be, very mobile, and sort of, pushing outward, right, and in kind of exploring new horizons. And there's almost a negative feeling about particularly those who migrated on the basis of just like family or just marrying, or are not really in, let's say, white collar jobs but live
Mm.
overseas. So when they come back, of course, when you convert dollars into rupees, that's a lot of money. So there's like a lot of show off sort of thing
Mm.
with
Mhm.
the money that comes into India from, non-residential or non-resident Indians, NRIs as it's called. So I actually had a kind of a little bit of a repulsive kind of sort of feeling to, I mean, it's a
Oh,
little bit of a
those
strong
people who
word.
go abroad.
Right, exactly. It's just because you see all of this, it's just like a mix of those cultural artifacts, which is kind of
Yeah.
like a little bit of a show off culture, a little bit of obviously income levels, wealth levels vary massively, and like I said, currency, once you convert that, we're talking about completely different things. And I never thought, oh, I would like, go out and sort of like be one of those, if you
Hmm.
may.
Oh, wow.
But
Well, was there a critical moment that or event that launched you into your path as it is now, maybe even before you
mhm.
started studying at different universities around the world?
That is a great question. They were definitely a series of events that happened that sort of, I guess, ultimately led to where I am now. So I've been in the US for close to 6 years now, and based out of Hawaii currently, which I think is the best state to live in the US, but we can talk about that later. um, but I think, to be honest with you, there is a mix of pull and push factors. um, I was a stellar student in India, always, top of my class and everything. And when I started college, I remember it was like kind of falling from a high cliff or something. I
Hmm.
went to a private school, so it was like great, sort of high quality education, liberal, relatively speaking. And I went to like college. So in India, the best schools are private schools, but the best colleges and universities are public universities and
Okay.
colleges.
Okay.
So it's just interesting because,
Yeah.
you go from one system to another.
Oh,
And
yes.
um, I just remember how frustrated I was the first year of my college, because it was, by the way, it was female only,
Mm-hmm.
which was just so weird, talking about how close minded. Um, Most of the seats go to the reserved caste and classes, so lower economic classes, people who traditionally been dalits and untouchables and have faced centuries of repression. So there are all these dynamics that play in. And so when you go in as somebody who is educated and learned, and merit is important. I didn't come from a rich family or anything, just
Mm-hmm.
middle class family, but education was important because my mother has two master's degrees, and if it wasn't for that, like, I would probably be raising two or three kids somewhere, quite honestly. I
Wow.
mean, this is
She sounds
massive,
like a big inspiration.
she is, for sure. And then that's interesting because I think from an enablement perspective, as my father,
Hmm.
who made and helped things happen. But sort of coming back to what those events were. So I started looking at, okay, well, what is available overseas?
Mm-hmm.
Um, with the help of some people, I actually managed to convince my father to help. And why convince my father? Because why? Female safety. And, again, we could
Yeah.
talk about that, right? Like, they just think, okay, if you study in a different city in India and you live on your own, you're definitely going to get raped or some shit. It's like that's the sort of fear
Right.
parents and, families live with
Right.
in
I
India.
convinced my dad to let me study in Moscow, Russia when I was 19 for 5 months going into the cold of winter. And I remember walking around every day with my money belt underneath my clothes and never taking a taxi because I was so afraid based on everything they had told me. But I had convinced them to let me find my own way. So you did the same.
Absolutely. That was it. I was 19 years old. And yeah, started looking overseas, and then ended up doing an internship in Canada, convinced those professors who hosted me, Canadian professors, to give me letters of reference just on the basis of 4 or 5 weeks of all paid
Wow.
internship,
Yeah.
to then apply for master's programs in Europe. And that's
Right.
kind of really sort of set me on a different trajectory. So I would say
There's
those
this
were some of the.
yeah, I think you exemplify. There's this teacher I like, and one of her sayings is use everything. Use everything you've got. Don't apologize for it. Don't doubt it. Don't ask where it came from.
100%.
Just use it. So you did
Yeah,
that.
100%. And you know what? It's so interesting because and when we kind of circle back into kind of what my status here is and everything, I guess we could talk more
Yeah,
about it in
I want to
length. But
pivot a little bit when you're ready towards, tell us about your US immigration journey. But yeah, go ahead.
and no, I guess we can jump into it actually, because I think that's sort of a good segue. Well, my U.S. immigration journey, B1, B2, that I applied from Canada while I was in Canada to actually present at a conference, my first international conference at the University of Hawaii in
Wow.
Manoa, in Oahu. And life comes full circle. Here I am, 7, 8 years later. Um,
Good place to spend COVID. I mean, you made a good decision a few months ago.
there you go. And then J1, J2, I was very fortunate because my first J1 was sponsored by Harvard Kennedy. And, when you have a Harvard stamp in your passport, it does sort of make a difference. And I never had any visa
Mm,
rejections, on any front.
hmm.
So I just want to put it out there. Of course, the prestige of the institutions matter as well, right? For the for
Yeah.
the for the audience here, and definitely kind of do your research,
Mhm.
and obviously talk to your lawyer here in the US. So talk to you, Sophie.
Thank you.
um, and then I had another J1, and then two H1Bs. I didn't exhaust them because you can
Okay.
get,
Were they,
obviously up to
just out
three
of
years.
curiosity, were they lottery H-1Bs or were they cap exempt academic H-1Bs?
That's a great question. So I got lucky. They were lottery H1Bs, and
Nice.
I won the lottery first one, the first time, and the second one, I'd only used the first one for a year and a half, not even
Okay.
2 years. So then
Okay.
you don't go back to the cap, right?
Hmm.
So the
Yeah,
second
you're
one
able
was
to transfer
easier.
it over. That's great.
Exactly.
Wow. So you had two J1, you had two J visa, two J stays, two H-1Bs, and then what?
And then yeah, we got an O1,
So
the
awesome.
next thing. And then my EB1, as I mentioned, is also approved.
Yeah.
Of course, there are country wait lists and everything. So
It's
yeah, so
wonderful.
that's.
So, do you have any advice? Because a lot of folks come to me and ask me to evaluate their O1 credentials, and there seem to be some cultural differences and perhaps gender differences and age differences. But a lot of times, for various reasons, people are very insecure, even if it turns out that yes, they probably are qualified for an O1. They're afraid because they're like, well, I didn't win a Nobel Prize yet. Like, let me just go back to my university and spend a few more years writing more papers. I know what they're going to be like, please. I'm like, okay, it's your life, but, or you could just do it now and you would probably get approved. But what was your thought process like going through that evaluation and deciding to pull the trigger and do it? Were you nervous? Were you scared? Do you have any advice for people making that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's exactly what I was kind of getting into in the last thing we were talking about. There is a mindset shift that happens and needs to happen when you're going for what is in essence a self-promoter visa.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a way to be sort of stamping it as a self-marketing visa. It's just you have to vouch for yourself.
Yeah.
And just even if you have imposter syndrome, like you need to get over it. And I would say, particularly for folks from Asia, right? I'm
Hmm.
from India, so I think there is this massive cultural difference
Yeah.
where being a self promoter is looked down upon massively.
Right. I
And
also see that with
that
Germans, for example. Hmm.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, the cultures where humility is important. It's important that um, somebody else says, "Oh, this person did great." So the praise, the appreciation has to come from a source outside yourself. Um,
Ah,
is hard. Sort of, I didn't think I was eligible for O1, and here's what happened. I actually met a friend. And so big shout out to, I guess, to Adrian Roop, whom I met in LA, and he's just a gifted media executive. And he said to me, I applied for it, I got it, and I don't even have a fraction of the kind of different laurels perhaps you have, Navroop, and I don't even have the kind of online presence you have from, like, just I've
yeah.
lost account, hundreds of conferences and events and speaking engagements that I've done just because I loved it. Just I loved education and sort of and he said, just hit on a straight line. And so I ended up engaging who happened to be his lawyer,
Nice.
and we went from there. And when we finally submitted it, it was 650 pages. And I'm
Yep.
not saying this to intimidate anyone, but then that's the other thing. There's also a way to amplify your work, which I think any immigration lawyer, particularly doing O1s and EB1s, know very well how to kind of, like, create that case.
Mhm.
But I would
Mhm.
say my advice is that your job is to take a chance and just know that the US system and what accomplishment means here just works very differently. So for me,
Absolutely.
this whole journey of appreciation has to come from outside, where every time my mom and in middle school or primary school would go to, like, these student what is it called, like the parent teacher meetings,
Mhm.
and teachers would say great things. That's so, like, culturally embedded, right? All the
Mhm.
way to, like, professors appreciating in university and colleges, to now where it's like, basically you're gonna make, when it comes to your money or wherever you reach in your career, just as far as you can also communicate who you are, what you do, what you stand for. And
Yes.
that is a mindset shift. So I would just say, start shifting that mindset.
That is very brilliant and insightful. And thank you so much for that cultural framing around it. That's really valuable as well. And for those of you listening, if you want to take a step towards that mindset shift and take your future into your own hands, please do check out our class called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp, which is available to you in the show notes. I put together 15 video modules over the last year going into depth on each one of those O1A requirements and explaining how you too can generate the portfolio of accomplishments to literally qualify yourself, exactly as Navroop is mentioning. So now, Navroop, I would love to hear what you are doing at the Digital Economist, where, full disclosure, I have the honor of being a council member. But please tell us about what you're doing and your exciting launch at the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, Sophie, we're so delighted and just honored to have you as part of the council. So, Sophie was the one person that I basically just saw LinkedIn. I said, "Do you want to be a council member?"
And I said yes.
Right
I was
off the
like,
bat.
when did I agree to? But it sounds
Right.
great.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, the Digital Economist is a global impact platform, and we are in the business of creating the future of the global economy, particularly leveraging the digital technologies we have at our disposal. We have a fantastic group of people, which, Sophie, you're a part of, combining technologists, economists, and all of their strengths together into defining, for example, the future of work, the future of tech, right? How do you build responsible AI? How do you, look at it, new infrastructure technology like blockchain? What does that mean for economic systems? So we curate and create everything from research insights to applicable strategy insights, all the way to the products and services. And we also, just a little teaser, launching a tech platform that would combine and basically host all of the initiatives under a single umbrella. So it's very exciting. I think the future of all businesses is community focused, inclusion focused, and you got to have your own platform. So, we live in the world of what we call platform economics. And so it's kind of very much geared towards that. And yeah, we are a year old. Our annual report is going to come out shortly on our 10 initiatives that we launched and also successfully completed, including the entrepreneur and training program, which Sophie, you know
You had a
about.
wonderful cohort of brilliant people from around the world. Are you going to be continuing that and taking applications? Is that something that our listeners can apply
Yeah,
to?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing I would say is, yeah, check out our website. We don't know when the second cohort is,
okay.
and there are a few reasons for that, interesting reasons for that. And we just, honestly, we're also just at capacity with the number of initiatives in TD right now. So I would say please connect with us, and you can
But
subscribe
basically, if
and
folks subscribe to your newsletter at the Digital Economist, they'll be able to be notified
right,
whenever new groups
absolutely.
do
In
come up.
fact, right, the email notifications are
Yeah.
the fastest way to know about our initiatives. They go out first before any social media announcements and other things like that.
And you have a wonderful ongoing speaker series, which I was honored to be in. But those talks are continuing out into the new year
Absolutely.
as well. And there's a
Weekly.
lot of
Yep.
brilliant folks speaking on that. So so
Right, right,
exciting.
right.
For those of our listeners who are in fintech or blockchain or crypto or other types of economics related startups, where do you think this is all going? Do you have any advice for
Hmm.
them from the inside?
Yeah. I mean, that is the future, is what I would say. So you're in the right spaces. There is, of course, a lot of noise. So it's important to have your own unique voice, is what I would say. And by that, I don't mean just sort of playing your identity sort of card, which is one way to have a unique voice, and that's very important. But what are the new insights and expertise that you're bringing to the table? I just think from just a global economy perspective, a lot of the automated jobs that kind of just recycle things,
Hmm.
jobs that um, are, around passing information or just handling information are going to go away eventually.
Hmm.
So
What did you
then
call those jobs?
just kind of taking information around,
Okay.
just kind of like recycling stuff.
Yeah.
Like a
Okay.
classic example would be like a secretary, male or
Right.
female, right?
Right.
And basically what you're doing is you're kind of like a communication bridge.
Right.
It's just, honestly, it's shocking for me when, like, in 2021, when you're trying to schedule a call, somebody would link to their assistant or secretary, again, male or female. And I'm like,
Wonderful
there.
assistant, and even though I have Calendly, I would not be able to survive without my
Oh,
assistant.
no, 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 no.
So
Yes, I was actually referring to scheduling. Of course, we need
yeah,
help.
yeah.
We all have help, and there's no way to. It's not about it, but just from a scheduling perspective, just because I just think with all the tech integration tools,
Right,
it massively saves time.
right.
So just as a tiny example,
Yeah.
just with one click, or you can automate things. So I just feel like the economic value of those kinds of jobs is going to reduce. And
Okay.
remember, inflation keeps happening. So if the
Right.
wages are not increasing, and prices keep going high, the actual value, so if you're making 50 or 60K a year, which would be a typical salary of an assistant
Mhm.
in an entry level role or even a mid level role,
Mhm.
then that is not a lot of money to live
Mhm.
well on.
Mhm.
Maybe you can pay rent and have decent food and just pay insurances and health insurance and car insurance, on and on and on. But I don't know, if this
Yeah.
job is not remote, if you can't live in a suburb, if you can have a family live on that sort of money.
So
Um,
then for folks who are listening, it's like, okay, well, own the means of production, create your own company that can benefit from those changes,
yeah, I mean, I'm not
right?
saying not your own company. I'm saying bring a fresh perspective, but don't let that become a handicap. So when I
Mm,
looked at the blockchain space, there were only computer scientists and consultants trying to figure out that this is the next new thing they can consult and make money on. But what was missing was there was no economist um,
ah,
talking about what that means for or bringing insights or working on or building the next economic systems in the future. And so
okay.
that became my differentiated value proposition.
I
And
see.
that's exactly the kind of thing you need for O1 visas or EB1. And if you sort of looking for a career here. So it kind of all ties together, right?
So
Which at
cool.
the time I wasn't thinking about it that way. But when I actually spoke and sat down with my immigration attorney, he's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's it. So we kind of had like a moment of reflection and insight, kind of
And
like a
personal
little.
branding exercise too. It's
There
all of
you
that.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, paperwork, generally speaking, because I have my own opinions on the immigration system worldwide, right?
Mm,
And just from a integrated global economy trade perspective, I just think immigration is such a huge burden, and I'm kind of
absolutely.
optimistic, right, about the next administration hopefully reforming a 200-year-old system, right,
Yeah.
which we all kind of
That would
had
be
to work very
amazing.
hard.
And if there's ways that we could link together the Digital Economist and World Economic Forum to do a new global professional work visa passport entry
Let's do
system,
it.
that would be so amazing. Okay, life
Yeah,
goals.
yeah, let's do it. I think there are some examples, right? Like Estonia and others who,
Right.
and you know about this, who have visas and for digital nomads. And I just think
Mm,
talent is equally distributed, right, in the world, but
right.
opportunities
Right.
not. So
Right.
I think that's where
Absolutely.
the reform needs to happen.
Wow. Well, I would love to then just in closing get any words of wisdom that resonated with you for any of the darker times on your journey, or anything that might be beneficial to our audience of uh, global folks in tech startups who are interested in living in the US one day.
So I would say don't doubt yourself, and other people's opinions of you is not your business. You don't have to worry about it. But this has to
Mm,
come from a place of authenticity, of humility, where you have transcended that, you know, um, journey where you wonder if you're enough. So
mm,
nurturing self-worth, and which is beyond just accomplishments and your opinion of that, is the first step. So I would say start there, and I think you'll be at a place where you're pursuing your mission, your purpose, your journey, and not waste time in agonizing about what other people think about you. So if I were to look back at my journey 5 years ago, when kind of got my first, I guess, H1B or even J1, I would say that is something I feel like I mentally wasted time on. That
mm.
I would, one advice I would give to myself is it's not going to matter 2-3 years even from now, which is not a lot of time.
Were
So
you
now
worried that your family or friends back home would judge you, or that your colleagues here would judge you, or?
I just think, so one of the many attorneys I spoke with as part of my journey over the past 6 years said to me H1Bs in particular are like indentured work, right? Indentured
Oh,
slavery. And
oh,
so,
that's
and it's so you know all about it. I would totally recommend O1s to anyone, which I personally think are the best visas, but depends on your situation.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I just think you have very little, comparatively speaking,
Yeah,
leverage, right? So your
absolutely.
employer has sponsored your visa, so your conduct in the company, this is always at the back of your mind, that what if they pull out that
Yeah.
visa and they cancel you. We were talking about
Mm-hmm.
cancel culture on Clubhouse, which
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of fun these days.
Yeah, you
The
can
other day,
follow Navroop and me on Clubhouse.
yeah,
Speaking
absolutely.
there
If you have an
regularly.
iPhone, and yeah, if you can also reach out to us for any invites you might need on that. But yeah, so I just think that is a big reform that has to happen
Mhm.
as well. And I mean, when I look back, I think it's natural for most humans to feel bound when you know your work is kind of tied to, or I should say your kind of existence in the
Yeah.
US is tied to
Yeah.
a certain visa. And I just think all of us as entrepreneurs, as attorneys, need to be bold and demanding reforms there. So
Mhm.
it shouldn't be like, all right, either you have that job or you leave the country in like, a month or two or three, or with in COVID, I know the Indian H-1B
Yeah.
layoffs got like a
Yeah.
6 month extension there, or a 6 month grace period. So it was a mix of factors, right? It wasn't so much that I had less confidence or self doubt, but I also think from a situational perspective, there was that.
Mhm.
And I feel this goes hand in hand. So there is a feedback loop there. And so you need to break through and identify what is it that you can leverage, is
Mhm.
would be my piece of advice. Where
Mm.
is that firm ground, and where can you take chances? Where can you take risks? So I think as entrepreneurs, many of us are actually kind of on the risk averse side of things, because then we can go out and take risks on other aspects. So
Mm.
balancing that is important.
Silo your risk into places where it's manageable and places where you don't
Yep.
want it.
Diversify.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wise words from the brilliant economist, Navroop Sahdev. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Sophie. This is wonderful.
Thank
I wish
you.
to the audience, and take chances, and don't wait for it.
Absolutely. Seize the day. Thank you. And for our listeners out there, please do check the show notes for many of the links we discussed and a link to sign up for our Alcorn immigration law newsletter. And please do subscribe, rate, and review us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and we always appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking with you next time. Bye.